If you're anything like me, then you learned about making money online from these guys. Maybe you went on TikTok and you saw a video of a Lamborghini and you headed over to YouTube and searched up the dreaded words of how to make money online. From that point onwards, you went into the rabbit hole of online business, schemes, ploys, make money online, get rich quick, and worst of all, business models. Your SMMA, your FBA, your IPGA, your growth operating, your freelance brand scaling, these really nicely packaged up terms and schemes that seem so appealing because all of the hard work is done for you, right? All you have to do is buy their programs, do exactly what they did, and hey presto, you've got an online business. And then you buy into their program, you're overwhelmed by the amount of information that you have to consume, and you come to realize that these really nicely packaged up business models that they talk about aren't actually what they seem. Starting a business model isn't the ready meal of online business that you thought it was, where you can just chuck it in the microwave and a few minutes later enjoy your meal. No, you come to realize that all of these business models are actually just complex skill sets that you didn't realize that you had to learn in order to actually succeed within it, which funnily enough puts you at a disadvantage from the get-go because you're trying to sell a service that you're not good at with skill sets that you don't have to people who aren't going to buy from you in the first place. Well, that's what happened to me anyway. And to be honest, it set me back much further than I would like to admit. It gave me the wrong expectations of what online business actually consists of. And so in this video, I'm going to explain to you why business models are dying and what you can actually do in order to get ahead if you're someone who wants to make money online, whether you're just getting started or you've been in the game for a couple months, maybe a year or so now. So you can actually get ahead using the same principles that I use myself and I've taught to thousands of others. So firstly, you need to understand what the actual problem is of these business models, aside from the fact that you're completely blindsided from the get-go. Now, the biggest problem that I find with business models, and bear in mind the fact that I actually used to teach a business model, so I come from both perspectives as having done it before and having taught it to others, is that when you jump into a business model, you're innately trying to sell something that you're not actually good at. And when you actually start a business model, you're blindsided, like I said, by the skill sets that you didn't actually know that you had to learn in order to actually get good at it. And not only get good at it, but put yourself ahead of other people. Because in business, at the end of the day, you're competing against other people. No matter what you're selling, no matter who you're selling to, there's always another option. So why should you put yourself at the same level playing field, or if not at a disadvantage to everyone else that you're competing with, to sell the same thing to the people that they're selling stuff to? It doesn't really make sense, especially when it comes down to the fact that a business model innately is based on the fact that you are copying and pasting what someone else has done. A business model is a stack of skills that you squeeze together in order to produce a specific result, right? So if you're doing that, and so is everybody else, then why would you just get into business initially competing with everybody else? You're almost making your own market saturated by choosing not only a saturated market, but a saturated industry to be in. And it may not be that saturated, it's fair enough. It may be a super new and modern and unique business model that you're actually running, but as it grows, more and more people are going to be directly competing with you. In fact, the reason that I stopped running my previous business coaching where I was teaching a business model is because as I was teaching it to people, my life became more difficult because my actual process of selling the service became more difficult because I was building up competitors. I was building up the competition within my industry, within my niche, which made no sense for me to then continue to run it. And that's what you're doing with a business model. And I get how sexy it sounds. I get freelance brand scaling. Oh my God, it sounds so unique and so cool and so crazy. It's not. And the thing is that when you start a business model taught from someone who is very popular, chances are there are tens of thousands of other people doing the exact same thing, which means that you are consciously choosing the path of competing with all of these other people with the same information that they have, which means that you either have to get really, really, really good at doing that thing so that you're ahead of those tens of thousands of people, or you just do something completely different. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you how to actually do that with a skill set that you may already have that you may not know that you had previously. So let's dive in. Now, if you want to get ahead, the first thing you need to understand is that your skill set is everything, because your skill set is the hub of your entire business. It's what everything is built around. It's like the foundation. It's the centerpiece. It's the actual piece of value. It's almost like the nucleus in a cell, right? Without your core skill set, the core thing that people want to pay for, nothing else matters. Everything else built around it, the fluff, the sales, the clients, the money, the content that you put out, the operations that you build, doesn't matter. Which is why it's incredibly important that you actually focus on developing not only your first core skill, but your skill set that surrounds that. A skill being something like social media editing, and a skill set being something like social media growth. You are combining different skills to produce a result. And that's why that should be your priority number one. And that should be your everything, your main focus. And in terms of how you can actually implement this yourself, there's a few different things you can do. But firstly, actually picking your own high income skill, if you haven't already got it, there's a few different criteria that you have to make sure that you're ticking off. That being that the skill is high income, it's transferable, and it's in demand. High income just being that people will pay a lot of money for it, quite obvious, right? Transferable being that you can actually give it to somebody else. You know, I've had plenty of people come to me and be like, my skill set is that I can tell what flag correlates to what country. And I go, will somebody else buy that? And they'll go, no. And I go, that's not transferable. So make sure it's transferable. And thirdly, making sure it's in demand is quite an obvious one. Do people actually already pay for it firstly, which means that there's a proven concept that you can then charge for it? And do people actually want it? Or is it just something that you're just basing an assumption off and saying, I'm assuming people want it, so I'm going to build a business around it? Be sure, don't guess. And the other thing that will justify whether it's high income or not is just if it solves a big problem. If it solves a problem that people will pay for, then perfect, it's high income because they're going to pay money in order to have their problem solved. So pick a high income skill or a skill set that is aligned with with these 3 different criterias. And it's funny because none of this is alien. Like if you look at a business model like SMA, for example, the core skill set behind it is actually just Facebook ads. That's the actual skill that you're selling, the thing that produces the result, and everything around it is just fluff. Freelance brand scaling, another popular one. The core skill set behind that is just Facebook ads. Everything around it is fluff. So if you understand that that's how these business models work, they are built with one skill set and then stacking many skills around it, why don't you just pick your own skill set that you're already good at? In fact, one of my favorite books, The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, has one lesson in it called The Law of Perception, basically saying that you can get ahead in terms of marketing, in terms of sales, in terms of growing a business, if you master the law of perception. And that's just basically being in control of how somebody else sees your thing. Not what it actually is, not what's behind the curtains, not the actual value of the product, but how somebody sees it. Like again, if I go back to the business model of freelance brand scaling, which would not exist if Bread Scales didn't do incredibly well on social media, then people would just see it as Facebook ads. But because he's given it a name, because he's developed a perception around it, people see it as this crazy, different, unique, special, spectacular thing. But actually, it's exactly the same skill set that he's using that SMMA was using. So in fact, the business models are exactly the same. But because there's such good perception around it, so many people buy into it, and therefore it becomes incredibly saturated. And if you really don't know what high income skill to pick, what skill to base your entire business around, I'm going to leave a link in the description down below where you can actually click on it, and it's going to help you identify your own high income skill, because I know that's one of the biggest bottlenecks that most people face. Then we move on to the second step, and this is identifying a market that's best suited to your skill set. Now, what you want to ideally pick is a market that has a problem that you can solve with your skill set. If you tick that box, there's a perfect market. And it's funny because this step of picking your market is the same step that every single business has to pick ever. You know, every single product that I'm using that you can see around me has those 2 steps. They have a problem they solve. Not everything's a skill set, which is a product. We're talking about service-based businesses. They have a problem they solve, and they have a market that they're actually selling to and they're targeting. If you have those 2 things, you're absolutely golden. So you need a service you can provide that's built out of your skill set, and you need a market that you can sell it to. Once you have those 2 things, you have a business. You have a vehicle that can make you money pretty much on demand, as long as you know how to actually turn the vehicle on. And similar to every other business model, you cannot ignore this step. I know a lot of people that will develop their skill set, like video editing, for example, and just go and offer it to everyone and anyone and be like, who needs video editing? I can edit your videos. Until you actually identify a specific market, you are a generalist, and generalists don't get paid as much as specialists. So become a specialist and you will innately make much more money. And there's a few different questions you can ask yourself in order to find the market that suits the best. First one being, what market cannot live without it? What market cannot live without my skill set? That typically also means that they're already paying for it, right? So look at the markets that are already paying for your skill set, and they cannot run their business or their empire without your skill set, without your service, because those people are likely going to be willing to pay money for it, because that's how they thrive, that's how they survive. An example of this would be something like running Facebook ads for e-commerce companies. E-commerce companies cannot survive without ads 99% of the time. So selling the service of ads to e-commerce companies makes a lot of sense because their business cannot live without it. The second question to ask yourself is, what market values it the most? Basically being, what market puts your skill set on a pedestal? Because if I went to a restaurant in my local area and I said, hey, I'm going to manage your social media for you, they don't value that skill set very much because it doesn't produce a big result for them. It's not a life or death situation for them. However, there will be other markets that do value the skill of social media management a lot more. If you take a clothing brand, for example, that sells through social media, they probably value the skill set of social media management a lot more than a restaurant does. And therefore, because they value it more, they're going to be willing to pay more money for it. And that's a market that you should pinpoint. Third question is, what market already pays for it? Again, like I said before, when you can identify the fact that they already pay for it, there's that proven concept there. You don't have to convince them that they need a skill set. You just have to present your skill set in a better fashion than the ones they're currently paying for. And then we move on to step 3, which is actually creating a transformation, because people don't pay for services until there's a transformation identified. This is classic. You'll see this all over the place. This is things like going from fat to fit. That's a transformation, but it's actually weight loss. It's a gym membership. It's a diet, whatever it may be. You've got things like broke to rich. That's every single business model ever. People don't pay necessarily for the actual model, the stuff they're learning. They pay for the transformation, for the outcome, which is going from broke to rich. Again, people care about the transformation because the outcome becomes more tangible. Transformation sells. You don't necessarily buy a gym membership to go to the gym, but you do it to get swole because that is the transformation. So until you can actually identify a transformation that your skill set helps produce, you just have a skill set. When you identify a transformation, you then have a service, an actual thing that takes them from A to Z. That's kind of what you're looking for ideally. And I'm sure that your skill set does have one. So if you had the skill set of, let's say it was creating AI automations for a company in hospitality, for example, for a hotel, your service isn't necessarily the actual process of building the automations. That's the skill set. The service is actually helping them go from incredibly unorganized and messy and all over the place to very very organized and streamlined and efficient and saving their time. That is a transformation you're helping them achieve, and that's what people pay for. So make sure that you've identified a transformation within your service. Then we move on to step 4, which is just kind of like finding where they reside and actually reach them, in terms of not all outreach works the same. Not all people are going to be able to reach out to the exact same way. If you were to reach out to a hotel, you would try and contact them in a different way as if you were to reach out to a coach online who had a social media presence. For example, you want to find where they are and also what avenues they monitor, which is an important one, because there is a very low chance that if you wanted to work with hotel chains, they would necessarily be monitoring, I don't know, their TikTok DMs, right? They're probably not going to be looking at those. They're not going to be monitoring those avenues, but I tell you what avenues they would be monitoring is probably the phone line. If they're a hotel, they're probably going to be monitoring the phone lines because that's how they get business. So you can actually infiltrate that avenue and do your outreach through that process. But again, you've got many different avenues. You can use email, you can use Facebook DMs, you can use Instagram DMs, you can use LinkedIn DMs. There are different avenues for different markets within different industries, within different niches. So use the according ones and you'll be able to get the best results possible. But that is literally step 4. You find where your market is that you've already identified from back here, that you know that you can achieve a transformation for, and you reach out to them where they already exist. Once you reach out to them where they already exist, you can then pitch your offer and you pitch your service. And the thing that you want to make sure that you're focusing on is actually creating omnipresence. Now, omnipresence is the idea of being everywhere all at once. You can do this through 2 different methods. You can do it through inbound and you can do it through outbound. Now, inbound is typically making content. You make content talking about pain points that your prospect has. They see your videos and the content that you're making and they say, we have that problem. We're going to reach out to this person because it's clear that they solve our problem. Through outbound is where you are doing your direct outreach. You're making the phone calls, you're sending the emails, you're sending the direct messages. You want to do both ideally because both creates omnipresence and both also just gives you the best possible chance of actually getting a response. And then those 2 things move into selling. And I'm not going to go into too much detail of selling just because we would be here for literally hours if I were then to run you through the selling strategies and selling process and stuff like this. But the message I'm really trying to get across to you in this whole video is that business models are dying because the more popular they become, the more saturated they become, the more difficult it is for you to actually pop your head above the crowd. So what you need to do instead is you need to start off with a skill set, you need to develop that skill set and go through this exact framework that I've just spoken to you about to actually monetize that skill set, and you will have your own online business much more efficiently, much more effectively than any business model that you can get your hands on. So be unique, stand out, run your own business, not somebody else's, because you have a skill set and that skill set is valuable. I can guarantee it. Well, that's the understanding that I've developed from helping literally hundreds to thousands of people do exactly the same thing with their own unique bespoke skill sets. And if you want to learn how you can potentially work with me doing the exact same thing, I'm going to leave a link at the top of the description. Click on that link, watch through the video, see what I have to offer, and it may just change your life. Who knows? Or alternatively, watch the video that you see on screen now because YouTube's recommended that because it is a prime video that's going to help you solve the problems that you have.